From $120 million dreams to a downgraded reality, Harry and Meghan's Hollywood empire has just collapsed in real time. That was the line splashed across international headlines one Thursday evening as news broke that Spotify had severed its $20 million deal with the Sussexes and Netflix had quietly stripped their $100 million contract down to a far less glamorous first-look agreement. Within hours, social media was ablaze, hashtags trended worldwide, and commentators declared that the so-called streaming royalty had just been dethroned. It was a stunning reversal for a couple who only 3 years earlier had been heralded as the hottest new power players in Hollywood. Back in September 2020, Netflix's announcement of a multi-year deal worth over $100 million seemed like a masterstroke. A royal couple with global name recognition granted financial security and full creative freedom to launch Archewell Productions. At the same time, Spotify signed them for $20 million, touting Meghan and Harry as fresh, influential voices in podcasting. Together, these contracts were supposed to cement their transformation from royals into cultural entrepreneurs. But the golden promise cracked quickly. Spotify's Archetypes podcast launched with fanfare, and a star-studded guest list sputtered after just 12 episodes. Executives privately complained about delays, production difficulties, and underwhelming engagement. Ultimately, the platform ended the deal with brutal efficiency. Netflix, meanwhile, was equally unimpressed. Projects like Heart of Invictus and Live to Lead barely made a dent in public consciousness, delivering neither the cultural impact nor the commercial return Netflix had envisioned. One executive told the Wall Street Journal, "There's no reason for us to keep pouring hundreds of millions into projects that simply don't resonate." And so the red carpet was rolled back. Instead of the financial safety net that once guaranteed their Hollywood survival, Harry and Meghan were left with a first-look deal, essentially the chance to pitch projects to Netflix, but with no obligation for the platform to fund them. If Netflix passed, they would have to shop their ideas elsewhere. Unlike their initial mega deal, there was no upfront payment, no guaranteed budget, and every concept had to endure Netflix's rigorous vetting. What had once been sold to the public as a renewal was in reality a very public demotion. American and British media didn't hesitate to frame the fallout as a brutal humiliation. Comparisons with the Obama's Netflix arrangement quickly surfaced, while the former president and first lady also hold a first look, deal their reputation for quality storytelling and their proven success keep their brand strong. By contrast, Harry and Meghan's reliance on royal celebrity had worn thin, replaced by the harsh metrics of Hollywood: ratings, engagement, and profitability. The financial consequences were equally sobering. Without guaranteed contracts, analysts estimated their income could plummet by more than 50%, forcing them into a hand-to-mouth existence where every project had to succeed just to keep their brand afloat. What had once seemed like a golden era of streaming domination was now reduced to survival, and tabloids gleefully christened their downfall with headlines like "From Streaming Royalty to Hollywood Sunset." It looked to many like the Sussexes' fairy tale reign in Hollywood was over. But then came the twist. An internal Netflix memo leaked to the press exposing the deeper reasons why the couple's multi-million-dollar deal had collapsed, and raising questions that went far beyond underwhelming viewership. But an internal Netflix memo has just leaked, and it reveals the real reason behind the collapse of their multi-million-dollar deal. The leaked Netflix memo landed like a thunderclap. In stark corporate language, it laid out exactly why the Sussexes' golden deal had been downgraded, citing disappointing viewership numbers, lackluster cultural impact, and a misalignment between projected value and delivered results. For observers, this was not simply a business adjustment. It was the kind of blunt internal assessment that stripped away the Hollywood gloss and revealed the hard truth. Netflix no longer saw Harry and Meghan as a guaranteed bet. Projects that were supposed to carry the Archewell brand into the mainstream had failed to ignite. Heart of Invictus, a heartfelt documentary tied to Harry's signature cause, the Invictus Games received modest coverage, but was quickly buried under Netflix's endless catalog. Live to Lead, pitched as a Mandela-inspired leadership series, attracted little more than polite reviews before vanishing from public conversation. What these productions lacked was not heart or effort, but traction. They didn't trend, they didn't dominate conversation. They didn't pull the kind of global audience Netflix demands from its flagship deals. The contrast with the Obamas became impossible to ignore. Barack and Michelle, who also operate under a first-look deal, had produced American Factory, an Oscar-winning documentary that validated Netflix's trust in them, proving they could deliver prestige and attention. By comparison, Archewell's slate looked anemic, more like content filler than cultural tentpole, and the memo made clear that executives were unwilling to keep throwing money at mediocrity. The honeymoon phase was over, replaced by cold financial scrutiny. Adding to the humiliation, earlier press coverage had framed the deal's renewal as a triumph, suggesting the Sussexes had secured their place in Hollywood for years to come. But the leaked memo revealed the truth. This was not a renewal, it was a downgrade, a polite demotion dressed in PR-friendly language. Instead of guaranteed millions, the couple now had to earn every cent by convincing Netflix their ideas could turn into hits. Gone were the days of security. In their place stood uncertainty, pressure, and the looming specter of rejection. Financial analysts were quick to point out the consequences. Without guaranteed upfront payments, Harry and Meghan's projected earnings could fall by more than half, a brutal blow to a couple whose lifestyle, from Montecito mansion upkeep to high-profile security costs, demands constant, significant income. Where once they had the luxury of time to develop passion projects, now each pitch carried existential weight, and each failure risked not only embarrassment, but financial instability. Hollywood insiders summed it up with one phrase: they're no longer investors' dream, they're just another risk. Public reaction followed a predictable arc. Loyal supporters argued that the couple were simply victims of corporate greed, punished for not conforming to formulaic content. Critics, however, saw vindication, claiming the Sussexes' star power had always been overinflated, propped up by royal intrigue rather than real creative talent. Social media split into familiar battle lines, with hashtags like #NetflixDropSussex trending alongside defenses from fans who insisted one hit project could still turn the tide. And just when it seemed the memo had settled the debate, another detail emerged. Netflix had attached specific performance metrics to the Sussexes' future pitches, benchmarks so rigid that failure to meet them could effectively shut Archewell out altogether. To the public, this looked like a corporate death sentence, dressed up as a second chance, a clause designed to ensure the company never risked another nine-figure embarrassment. And then a supposedly airtight clause surfaced, a piece of contractual fine print that seemed to prove the Sussexes' Hollywood chapter was already written, until the narrative suddenly flipped on its head. For days, the leaked clause was dissected endlessly across media panels and social feeds. On its surface, it seemed to be the final nail in the coffin, proof that Netflix had set Harry and Meghan up for inevitable failure, a set of performance metrics so strict that even seasoned Hollywood producers might struggle to meet them. Headlines declared the Sussexes' career effectively over, while pundits framed the contract as a graceful way for Netflix to wash its hands without appearing vindictive. The story, at least as it was first told, felt conclusive. The couple had been downgraded, boxed in, and left to fade away quietly. But then came the turn. Journalists digging deeper into the contract's fine print discovered that what had initially been spun as a renewal was nothing of the sort. This was not Netflix giving Harry and Meghan a second chapter, it was Netflix cutting them down to size. The so-called first-look deal, praised in glossy press releases, was in reality a stripped-down arrangement with no guaranteed funding, no upfront payments, and no protection against rejection. For Archewell, this was not a continuation, but a reset to zero, a demotion packaged to save face. Public perception began to fracture. Until that point, many supporters had believed the Sussexes still held meaningful leverage. After all, Netflix was still in business with them, wasn't it? But the revelation that every single project now had to pass through a grueling internal vetting process without any of the financial safety nets that once defined their deal changed the narrative overnight. Instead of global power players, Harry and Meghan looked like novices, once again forced to pitch ideas in crowded rooms where name recognition meant little and streaming giants cared only about numbers. The humiliation was sharpened by comparisons with the Obamas. Their first-look deal, announced years earlier, was interpreted as a natural fit, a recognition of their ability to deliver thoughtful, award-winning content. American Factory had won an Academy Award, and Netflix had basked in the prestige. For the Sussexes, however, the same arrangement was no badge of honor. It was a corporate downgrade, a statement that their brand had not delivered, that Netflix saw them less as creative partners and more as unproven hopefuls waiting in line. This revelation created a ripple effect across the industry. Hollywood insiders, once cautious about criticizing the couple, now spoke more openly. They're not guaranteed players anymore. They're just another pitch team with a famous name. One producer told Variety. Another executive, quoted anonymously in Deadline, said bluntly, "If they can't prove commercial value, they'll be treated like any other creators." And Netflix is never sentimental about contracts. For Meghan and Harry, the optics were brutal. They had built their post-royal image around independence and influence, selling themselves as visionaries, with unique access to stories no one else could tell. Yet the contract revealed they were back to square one, subject to the same gatekeepers and rejections as every struggling filmmaker in Los Angeles. The Hollywood power couple narrative so carefully constructed began to unravel, leaving behind only the stark image of two former royals fighting for relevance. Social media once again split along predictable lines. Loyalists framed the downgrade as a temporary setback, insisting the couple only needed one breakout project to regain momentum. Critics, however, saw vindication proof that the Sussexes had always relied on their royal titles rather than true creative merit. Memes circulated of Netflix executives ghosting Archewell pitches, while hashtags like "had Sussex downfall" began to trend. The court of public opinion was as ruthless as any corporate boardroom. And yet, even as the narrative turned against them, whispers suggested this wasn't the end of the revelations. Reporters who had seen the leaked memo hinted that there was more. Buried within the financial analysis attached to the contract were projections so stark, so damning that they not only explained Netflix's caution, but exposed just how precarious Harry and Meghan's future in Hollywood truly was. But those financial projections, once leaked, would deliver a blow even harsher than the downgrade itself, a revelation that would leave the Sussexes' Hollywood survival in grave doubt. The leaked financial analysis arrived not through tabloids, but via industry trade press, the kind of spreadsheets and forecasting reports that rarely reach the public eye. Yet once a copy made its way into journalists' hands, the content spread like wildfire, and for Harry and Meghan, it marked the cruelest twist in their post-royal saga. According to the analysis, Archewell's projected earnings under the new First Look deal would fall by more than 50% compared to the original Netflix contract, with no guaranteed baseline and only conditional payments tied to strict performance milestones. Put simply, the couple had gone from the security of nine-figure backing to the precarious position of freelance producers dependent on whether each individual pitch could pass Netflix's notoriously brutal greenlight process. Where once they could rely on a safety net, now they were walking a financial tightrope with no cushion below. The report went further, outlining the cascading risks this downgrade posed. Archewell's overhead costs, from staff salaries to office infrastructure, had been calibrated for a world in which multi-million-dollar advances arrived like clockwork. Without those advances, the organization faced potential downsizing, a humiliating prospect for a brand built on the image of global influence. Security expenses estimated in the millions annually loomed especially large. Without the cushion of guaranteed revenue, even maintaining their Montecito lifestyle could become a source of tension. The revelation was a stark reminder of Hollywood's indifference to royal pedigree. As one analyst quoted in Variety observed, "Netflix doesn't care about titles, they care about subscribers. If the Sussexes can't deliver content that people want to watch, the palace backstory won't save them." In that sense, the leaked numbers crystallized what critics had argued all along, that Harry and Meghan's power in Hollywood was contingent, not inherent, and that the streaming giants would not hesitate to turn the page if their content failed to perform. The public reaction was swift and merciless. British tabloids plastered headlines such as "From Palace Gold to Hollywood Debt," framing the Sussexes' fall as both financial and symbolic. American outlets were less gleeful, but equally blunt. The Hollywood Reporter described the situation as a hard reset, while Deadline went further, suggesting that Archewell might struggle to secure outside partnerships without a proven track record of hits. Social media predictably erupted in schadenfreude. Memes of Netflix execs handing Harry a rejection stamp went viral, and hashtags like #RoyalFlop and #SussexCrash trended for days. Even allies struggled to spin the news. Supporters argued that great creators often stumble before producing defining work, pointing to the Obama's First Look deal as evidence that patience could pay off. Yet the comparison only highlighted the gulf. Barack and Michelle had delivered an Academy Award-winning documentary within their first year, while Harry and Meghan were 3 years in with little to show. The leaked financials stripped away any illusion. They were no longer Hollywood's darlings, but high-risk aspirants clinging to relevance. The timing could not have been worse. With Spotify already gone and Netflix scaling back, the Sussexes' reputation as a Hollywood power couple crumbled, replaced by a harsher reality. They were now viewed less as innovators and more as a cautionary tale. Executives across town took note. If Netflix and Spotify, two of the most deep-pocketed players in entertainment, had chosen to distance themselves, what incentive would smaller studios have to gamble on the Archewell brand? And yet, as the numbers reverberated and the narrative of collapse solidified, whispers circulated that Meghan, ever the strategist, was preparing a countermove. Industry chatter suggested she had one last card to play, a potential project designed not just to prove Archewell's creative worth, but to shock Hollywood back into paying attention. But Meghan was not ready to fold. A final move was already in motion, one that could either salvage everything or mark the definitive end of the Sussexes' Hollywood gamble. For weeks after the financial forecast leaked, speculation swirled about Meghan's rumored final move. Whispers of a project that could reset the narrative, a bold swing meant to prove that Archewell was still capable of delivering the kind of cultural moment Netflix once believed in. Insiders hinted at development meetings, at new pitches being quietly floated, to streaming executives at Meghan, personally lobbying allies in Hollywood to give them one more chance. But for all the chatter, one fact remained unchanged. The Sussexes were no longer operating from a position of strength. They were fighting from the margins where every opportunity came with the weight of survival. The irony was striking. Just 3 years earlier, Harry and Meghan had been welcomed as near-guaranteed winners armed with contracts worth over $120 million and the sheen of royal prestige. Today they stood at the mercy of executives who judged only by metrics, who cared little for palace drama and everything for watch time and subscriber growth. What had once been framed as a triumph of independence, leaving the monarchy to build their own empire, had become a sobering lesson in how ruthless Hollywood can be, even to those with crowns in their past. The fallout reached beyond business. Commentators spoke of reputational decline, of how the Sussexes' carefully cultivated image as a Hollywood power couple had been dented, perhaps irreparably. Supporters insisted the story was not over, that one breakout hit could restore their trajectory. Detractors countered that the golden era was gone, that Archewell had been exposed as a house built on hype, rather than substance. The divide was as fierce as ever, each side armed with headlines, ratings charts, and sound bites as evidence for their case. And so the question lingers, is this merely the difficult middle chapter before a comeback or the beginning of an irreversible decline for Meghan and Harry? The path forward will not be paved with guaranteed millions, but with the fragile hope that one idea, one show, one film, one podcast can turn the tide. In that sense, their story has shifted from that of royals turned celebrities to that of any Hollywood hopeful pitching against the odds praying for a hit. What is certain is that the dream has changed. Success will no longer come from their titles nor from the aura of being royal rebels. It will come only if they can produce content that grips audiences, moves culture, and proves to the industry that their names can still carry weight. Whether they rise to that challenge or slip further into obscurity is a question only time and the next project will answer. And so the battle lines are drawn. To some, Meghan and Harry remain visionaries, unfairly written off, capable of silencing critics with one powerful story. These are the voices of hatched team survival. To others, the couple's decline is already sealed. Their Hollywood experiment exposed as little more than smoke and mirrors. These are the ranks of hatched team collapse.